Welcome to my presentation of strategies and supports for a new ELL student. This is part one of a three-part series, simply because I didn't want to make the files too large. So today I will show you the profile of my student and go over the first strategy, which is using a home language. I'd like to introduce you to Jorge. He is a real student. I have, of course, changed his name, but this is a student that I do work with as an ELL teacher. Jorge has family. He is new to the country. We don't know what his country of origin is, but we do know that his home language is Spanish. He doesn't have any knowledge of the English language yet. He can read and write in Spanish. He is in grade 5. I'd like to talk a little bit about Jorge's strengths and his stretches. He has several strengths. One of them is that he can read and write in Spanish. That will help him immensely when it comes to doing content within his class. He has supportive parents and a positive home environment. He has classmates that also speak Spanish fluently and are willing to translate. He has a teacher who is open to support and suggestions. That makes a big difference. For stretches for Jorge, he is quite shy and doesn't easily engage with other students. He likes to keep to himself. He tends to rely heavily on one of his classmates for translation rather than trying to figure out something on his own. And finally, he doesn't ask questions. Instead, he will sit quietly until someone notices that he needs help or guidance. In my district, we use IPT tests to figure out the level that the students are. Jorge took an IPT test for oral, speaking and listening, for reading and writing, and he tested at a level 1, which means that he is just at the beginning stages of his language journey. As his AIP goals, we have chosen for listening that he will understand basic survival and social language, and that he will understand basic vocabulary of the classroom, school, and home. This is his goal for the end of the year. For Jorge's speaking goal, we would like to see him respond with an action or gesture to simple questions and express one-word answers or short phrases to convey needs using gestures and actions. Again, this is by the end of the year. For reading, Jorge's end-of-year goals are distinguishing between the name and sounds of letters and pointing to individual words in isolation and in context. And finally, Jorge's goals for writing will be using letter sounds to write words and writing single words and short phrases to convey ideas. I don't think Jorge will have trouble with this by the end of the year, since he already does read and write in Spanish and is familiar with the Roman alphabet. Looking at the BC ELL standards, Jorge will be at beginning level. I won't read all of his goals out loud, but for writing, there are a few that stand out to me. He should be able to use mostly common and familiar words like family and color words, and be able to construct simple and repetitive sentences. By the end of the year, I like some of the strategies laid out for him, like using pictures, labeled diagrams, and familiar phrases to understand unfamiliar texts. For reading, again, I won't point out everything from the BC ELL standards, but I will mention some key aspects. Jorge should be able to recognize and identify some common words and sight words and use pictures to make meaning by the end of the year. There are some aspects here that I think will be simple for him because he does read and write in Spanish, and Spanish shares the same alphabet as English. For example, he won't have difficulty opening a book from the correct side or knowing to read from left to right. As for oral language, Jorge's goals for the year are straightforward. By the end of the year, he should be able to understand simple sentences about familiar topics like follow me or sit down quietly. He should be able to express himself in simple personal greetings, both listening and responding, respond to simple yes-no questions, and understand and use some memorized phrases like you're welcome. The first method I'd like to talk about is using home language and background knowledge in language learning. When students activate both their home language and their new language, they're more likely to be successful in both. In fact, according to learnalberta.ca, when English language learners listen, speak, read, and write, the same part of the brain is involved regardless of whether the home language or English is being used. That's a quotation from page 2 of Encouraging the Use of Home Languages. Therefore, it's important to encourage students to learn their home language at home while they learn English at school. Not only that, but also allow a student to use their home language during school assignments to gain better understanding and broaden their background knowledge. Jorge is in a good place to learn because he can already read and write in Spanish. Suggest providing a Spanish or English dictionary, and this is something that I did suggest to his teacher. There is a dictionary that has high frequency words, and there's an example on Teacher Pay Teacher, and another dictionary that he can add his own words to, and this is a blank one that he can have then the English word and the Spanish word. I've recommended these both to his teacher. Allowing a student to use their home language in class is very helpful for their learning and development. Allow Jorge to do his classwork in Spanish as long as he's working on the same curricular content as the rest of the class. For example, if compare and contrast was the focus for writing, the teacher could use material in both English and Spanish, like this. And there are links to all of these pages in my reference section. Learn and use some Spanish words in class. Label things in class with both English and Spanish words. When Jorge has finished an assignment in Spanish, work with him to translate the text. Use one of his peers to help. Above all, and I'll add this again and again, the most important thing is to build a relationship with him. Finally, he will be better equipped for success if he is allowed to access his home language. This is the end of part 1 of the 3-part series. Please stay tuned for part 2.